Imagine this. You're sitting in your living room, cup of tea in hand, and suddenly a wave of heat rises from your chest to your head, leaving you drenched in seconds. You tell yourself, must be the heating. But then you wake up at 3 in the morning, drenched again, heart racing, and no logical explanation in sight. And that's when the question hits you. Is this menopause? Has it started already? And when on earth is it supposed to end? Because if it were like a complaint that comes, lasts a few days and then goes, it would be one thing. But no, this is a proper game of shadows. And here's the big truth no one tells you. Menopause doesn't have an on-off switch. You don't wake up one morning menopausal and then, one fine day, it just goes away as if nothing happened. It's a long process with phases so subtle and changeable that if you don't know where you are within it, you could easily end up thinking you're losing your mind. So in this video, I'm going to lay it all out clearly. No euphemisms. And with those details they rarely mention during a GP appointment. First, when does menopause actually begin? Well, this is where it gets messy because menopause itself is only one single day in your life. That day when you've gone 12 consecutive months without a period, not a day more, not a day less. That day marks the official arrival of menopause. But of course, the tricky bit isn't that day. It's everything that happens before and after. And that's where we step into unfamiliar territory. The stage before is called perimenopause, and this is where it gets interesting because it can begin up to 10 years before your periods vanish. Yes, you heard that right, 10. And this is when those strange symptoms start popping up, the ones nobody connects to it, like sweating in normal situations, wild mood swings for no reason, insomnia that no herbal tea can fix, and that maddening anxiety that shows up without warning. But hold on, because here's something very few people know. Perimenopause isn't linear. It doesn't start with an irregular period, followed by hot flushes, and then the end. No, it's not that straightforward. It's like a hormonal roller coaster where, honestly, 1 month you feel amazing, the next you don't even recognize the woman in the mirror, and then, just as suddenly, you're back to feeling yourself again. It confuses absolutely everyone, which is why thousands of women go for years without realizing they're in this phase. And here's the most curious thing. Not all perimenopauses last the same amount of time. Some women experience it for a couple of years, while others can be in it for 10 or even 15. So, what does it depend on? Well, your genetics, your lifestyle, your childbirth history, your stress levels, even your exposure to environmental toxins. And since, honestly, no one warns you about this, you go to the doctor with insomnia, get prescribed tranquilizers, and head home thinking it's just your nerves. Before we continue, there's something important I want to mention. In the description of this video, I've left a resource that could really help you through this stage. It's something several women are starting to use and are seeing real changes. If you're curious, have a look later. It might be just what you need. Another important and honestly rarely mentioned fact is that there are invisible symptoms that can announce perimenopause before your periods start acting up. Mental fatigue, for example, that feeling of being unable to concentrate, forgetting names, losing track of conversations, or, going to the shops and coming back without what you went for. It's not that you're distracted or careless. It's because your estrogen levels, which influence neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, start fluctuating, and that directly affects your memory, your attention span, and your mood. And well, brace yourself because this one's a good one. Perimenopause also affects your gut microbiome. Yes, seriously. Hormonal changes lead to changes in gut flora, which then leads to changes in how you digest and absorb food. That's why so many women at this stage develop new intolerances, slower digestion, or digestive upsets they never used to have. And since no one links it to hormones, you can spend months swapping milks, avoiding gluten or popping probiotics, without anyone telling you what's really going on. Now, another thing hardly anyone talks about: changes to your skin and eyes. Female hormones don't just regulate your menstrual cycle, they also manage the hydration of your mucous membranes, your skin's elasticity, and even the health of your eyes, which is why you might notice dry eyes, irritation, itching, and an increasing need for artificial tears. The same goes for your skin: dry patches, random itching, wrinkles in the unlikeliest places, and a loss of radiance. And what do? Rush off to spend fortunes on creams when what really needs tending to is happening on the inside. And speaking of things you can feel but can't see, joint pain and morning stiffness. Hands that feel stiff when you wake up, creaky knees, a stiff neck. And you tell yourself, must be my age or the damp weather. Well, turns out estrogen has a natural anti-inflammatory effect on the body, and as it decreases, your tissues get inflamed more easily. And this isn't just an annoying niggle. If you don't take care of it, it can lead to early osteoarthritis or arthritis. Now then, the big question: how do you know where you are in all this? Because if perimenopause can last for years and not every woman has the same symptoms, how on earth are you supposed to identify it? Well, there are some telltale signs: changes in menstrual regularity, shorter, longer, lighter or heavier periods, recurring insomnia with no clear reason, intense mood swings unrelated to your surroundings, increased sensitivity to medicines and alcohol, unexplained anxiety, gradual vaginal dryness, weight gain around your middle despite keeping to your usual habits, and new digestive issues. If 3 or more of those sound familiar, love, you're on your way. And you don't need to wait for your period to disappear or obsess over hormone tests either, because, and here's a fun fact, your estrogen levels can fluctuate up to 10 times in a single day. So one-off blood work won't give you the full picture. Now then, about when menopause actually ends. Here's another bit that no one explains properly. Like we said earlier, menopause itself is just one day. But then comes postmenopause, and this is where the next round begins, because once those 12 months without a period have passed, you might think it's all over. But no, most symptoms don't suddenly disappear. They can carry on, ease off, or even new ones can appear. And I'm telling you this because many women have been sold the idea that peace and calm return once menopause is over, only to find themselves dealing with hot flushes that hang around for another 3 years, residual anxiety, persistently dry skin, and a libido that's still missing in action. And it causes a lot of frustration because no one prepared them for this part. And what's more, and this is crucial, the drop in postmenopausal estrogen has long-term effects on your heart health, bones, and cognitive function. Yes, even if you're no longer dealing with bothersome symptoms. That's why it's vital not to let your guard down, to keep up with regular health checks, and to adapt your exercise, diet, and emotional self-care routines. Do you want to know what your body's really up to in postmenopause? What unexpected symptoms might turn up, and what important things you should be doing to protect yourself long-term? Well, I'll tell you all about that in the next part, because this is where the lesser-known chapter of the story begins. If what you've heard so far has surprised you, stay tuned. The most important bit is still to come. All right, we've already talked about how this whole hormonal mess called menopause kicks off. and about that treacherous stage known as perimenopause, with its sneaky symptoms that drive you up the wall without you even realizing. But now it's time to dive right into postmenopause, basically that exclusive club no one wants to join, but we all end up in eventually. And here's another myth we need to shatter, that once your periods stop, the symptoms vanish. Spoiler alert, it doesn't always work like that. In fact, there are women who sail through perimenopause without a single hot flush, only to be hit by a hormonal storm after 12 months without a period. And nobody warns you. It's like thinking the party's over, and suddenly someone switches all the lights on. Here's something few people know. Some symptoms only show up after menopause. Take vaginal dryness, for example. For many women, it doesn't appear at the start, but months or even years later. And it's not just about discomfort during sex. That dryness affects the urinary tract too, causing recurrent infections, a constant urge to wee, and even little leaks when you sneeze or laugh. Things most women chalk up to getting older, but which can actually be treated if caught in time. Another hidden gem, really, is that your skin changes dramatically in the first 5 years after menopause. It's estimated you lose around 30% of your skin's collagen during this period. That's why you might suddenly notice more sagging, deeper wrinkles and skin that feels much thinner and, just a bit more fragile. If you've looked in the mirror and thought, why does my skin feel like tissue paper? Well, now you know. And brace yourself, because dropping estrogen levels also affect your heart. This is honestly one of the least discussed facts. Cardiovascular risk skyrockets after menopause. Up until then, women have a sort of natural hormonal protection against things like heart attacks and high blood pressure. But once those estrogen levels drop, your risk pretty much catches up with men's. And honestly, no one's paying attention to that. The same goes for your bones. Osteopenia and osteoporosis aren't just old lady problems. They're postmenopausal issues. Bone density quietly and steadily decreases, and many don't realize until they break something silly like slipping in the kitchen or tripping on a rug. That's why it's so important to look after your calcium, vitamin D intake, and most importantly, do impact exercises. Yes, walking is good, but to really protect your bones, you need things like light jumping, stair climbing, or lifting weights. And I'm telling you because it's one of those topics no one mentions until it's too late. Let's talk about brain health now, because honestly, that takes a hit too. You've probably felt that my brain's like a sieve sensation, right? Short-term memory suffers, concentration drops, and your mental sharpness just slows down a bit. But the most worrying bit is that the drop in estrogen has been linked in recent studies to an increased risk of dementia in postmenopausal women. Now, that doesn't mean we're all doomed, not at all. But it does mean it's a good idea to start looking after your brain sooner rather than later. Things like reading, puzzles, learning new things, socializing, and really keeping a lid on anxiety and chronic stress. Those are the biggest saboteurs of your neurons. And here's another little-known fact. Vaginal and urinary infections become more frequent after menopause, not just because of dryness, but because pH levels change and the local microbiome shifts. Basically, the good bacteria in your intimate area disappear or dwindle, leaving room for opportunistic microbes. That's why you might start having recurring infections for no obvious reason, even with good hygiene or no sexual activity. The good news? You can prevent this with specific vaginal probiotics and minimal doses of topical estrogen, which don't affect your whole system. Something else no one usually mentions. Your hair changes after menopause too. It doesn't just fall out more. It can become finer, more brittle, and for many women, thinner around the front or crown. This happens because the natural fall in estrogen removes the brakes on certain androgenic hormones, leading to that typically female hair thinning no one warns you about until you start seeing more scalp than hair. And as if that weren't enough, libido doesn't always come back. Some women recover it years later, others don't miss it one bit, and some feel like that part of their identity has vanished without notice. The important thing to understand is that this is natural, you're not broken, and there are ways to reconnect with yourself if you want to, from lubricants to localized hormone therapies or specialized psychological support. Because this isn't about pleasing anyone else, it's about feeling good in your own skin. So then, does all this ever end? Well, here's the big truth. There's no official expiry date for menopause symptoms. Some women experience them for 1 or 2 years, others for 5 or 10, and a small percentage deal with them their entire lives. But don't panic, because the most important thing is that with the right information, tools and self-care, you can enjoy a fantastic quality of life, even if your hormones are doing their own thing. In fact, one of the best-kept secrets is that life after menopause can actually be better. You stop living by the menstrual calendar, you're free from contraception worries, you don't have to stress about unplanned pregnancies, and if you look after your health, you can enjoy a kind of second youth filled with travel, new friendships, hobbies, and a deeper sense of self. Many women agree that by 55 or 60, they feel freer and more confident than ever. And trust me, that part never makes it into menopause awareness campaigns. So, to wrap up, I want to leave you with 3 practical tips that hardly anyone tells you, but honestly, they make a huge difference. First, get a bone density scan before you hit 60, even if you feel perfectly fine, so you know exactly where you stand and can prevent fractures down the line. Next, check your cardiovascular profile at least once a year after menopause, because many people still think that's just a men's issue, and it's really not. And finally, look after your vaginal and gut microbiomes with specific probiotics, because that tiny habit improves not only your intimate comfort, but your immune system and overall health too. And above all, normalize talking about this with your friends, your partner, your daughters, your GP, just anyone really. Because the more it's talked about, the less taboo it becomes, and the quicker we can ditch the cliches that have clung to us for decades. So now you know, menopause starts way earlier than you thought, lasts far longer than they ever told us, and ends, well, whenever your body feels like it. But you don't have to just put up with it, because with info like this, you can take charge and live this stage with dignity, joy, and honestly, a wicked sense of humor. If you've enjoyed this video, hit subscribe, give it a like and share it with all those women who need to hear this. No filters, no fluff. Because we deserve to know the truth about our bodies at every stage of life.